welcome to the second panel of the day here at Telecom Review Summit. The narrative behind this panel is actually about the journey. So a journey of how do we see service providers evolving from a telco-centric DNA into a more tech-oriented business model. And for most of us being in the industry for the past couple of decades, the question is it the first time we've seen it? Probably not, but were those previous attempts, success stories? I think we have mixed feelings. We've seen some very good and inspiring stories, but I think we have a common consensus that this time is going to look different. And why? That's because of the acceleration at the speed that the GenAI, so the generative AI, is expected to bring. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today as part of this panel. But first things first, I'm Giuseppe Cau, Senior Customer Solution Manager at Amazon Web Services, AWS, Telco Unit, looking after Middle East and Africa. And together with me on the stage, Kemal.
Hi everyone. Good to be here with you today. My name is Kemal Karakayali. I am part of the AWS team. I'm a senior manager of business development, working with telecom companies across Middle East and Africa. GenAI is one of the hottest topics of the year, so really excited. Looking forward to our conversation.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Geissah. It's a pleasure to be back here again in the region. So I head technology strategy and architecture in the CTO office. You've met our chief operating officer earlier, and I think almost everyone here knows our CTO, Ibrahim Gideon. Happy to be here again.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mounir Ladki. I'm co-founder, president, and chief technology officer of MYCOM OSI. We are a SaaS, service assurance and network analytics company. We are partners of AWS, like long-standing partners, and we collaborate together in serving communication service providers around the world and doing a lot on AI. So very happy to be here today.
Thank you very much.
Right. Salam alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marc Veelenturf. I'm the CEO for Atos for Middle East and Turkey. As maybe people know Atos, we are a 110,000 digital transformation global SI. Maybe people know us from the Olympic Games. We've been doing the Olympic Games for the last 20 years. In this region, we have about 4,000 people. Very much, I want to thank our strategic partner, AWS, for inviting me on this panel. And I think, as Yasser said, we were in Las Vegas, and we just won the Global System Integration Awards from AWS, and we are very keen to keep this a very active discussion.
Thank you, Marc. So, Denis Bernaert, Vice President, Strategic Customers, Telco at Salesforce. Thank you to AWS and Telecom Review for having me today. I'm very pleased to be here. I hate to say it, a bit more than 30 years experience in telco, starting first on the telco side as CIO at Altice SFR. In the last 20 years, more on the software and services in executive positions, in sales, delivery, and general management, such as Convergys, Converse, Amdocs, Netcracker, and more recently, Velocity and Salesforce. And my role today is really to help the regional teams to work with strategic accounts, especially in this region, so they can leverage the full power of Salesforce and improve their customer experience with our 360 offering.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. My name is Ramachandran. I run Middle East and Africa for Mahindra. We are a global system integrator. Happy to say that most of the companies or telcos that we work with in the region are here. So very happy to see the presence of our customers here. We are in the Gartner Leader Quadrant when it comes to telco GSPs, global service providers. We service about 280 telecom providers globally. And thank you, AWS, for this invitation. Would be looking forward to sharing some perspectives from our side. We focus on digital, cloud, network, connectivity, and anything around managed services for operators and enterprises both. Happy to be here.
Thanks, everyone. So I'd like to share a short video contribution from Nirav Kingsland that was recorded back in Las Vegas last week. We just had the reInvent. It's from the leadership team from Anthropic, which is one of the key generative AI companies in the market. I think there is a short video clip. Let's get it started anyway. Oh,
Mounir of Kingsland from Anthropic, saying hi from reInvent. We're just thrilled to have the ability to connect with you all in partnership with AWS. As you might know, Anthropic is working with telcos across the globe to make a telco-specific large language model. So we want to take our core technology and combine it with your industry expertise to fine-tune a model that can excel at telco use cases like customer service, marketing, and networking. We're eager to partner with folks across the globe, with you, with AWS, to create a model that can transform the industry. Greetings.
Okay, great. So, Samer, I mean, we've been discussing since this morning about the whole size and scale that can bring, but what is the overall opportunity for CSPs brought by the GenAI?
Sorry, I could barely hear you.
So what is the overall opportunity of the generative AI for the CSPs?
Yeah. No, so it's an amazing opportunity. We started on this journey late last year, obviously, with the announcements of OpenAI's advancements, and we started to look into what are the real use cases that actually could first optimize our cost and what we spend in our network. So generative AI is just one aspect of it, and AI in general is a great opportunity, and there are lots of partners already implementing it across the network infrastructure, whether it's operation and maintenance, predictive analytics of what's going to happen. But specifically on generative AI, what we saw is once the buzz, because there was a lot of buzz, went down and the realism came in, I don't think the buzz is over yet, because there's now talk of generative AI going into implementations of video analytics. So as we have large language models, there's now going to be large video models that are also going to optimize the way video analytics perform. So one of the key areas we started first is awareness. There needs to be a change of mindset internally. So once we understood how that ecosystem operates, we've built our own generative AI engines internally so that we encourage our employees to actually utilize a safe, secure by design, resilient by design, and sovereign implementation of generative AI within our own ecosystem. And then we started feeding it a lot of data. So for example, when somebody calls in to TELUS to raise a trouble ticket about any of the issues they might have, whether it's fixed, mobile, we actually have these scripts that our customer care agents go through. But we actually fed those inside, and we found through testing that, and this very agile development cycles, that you can save so much money by actually having that conversation with that agent. And my own personal team also started to look at it from an automation point of view. So we had, manual work if you want to start a new, application on a virtualized infrastructure, whatever it is, if it's core, if it's a, implementation of a specific module, that was manual. Then you had the automation, where you can have some commands run in sequence, but they're not really smart to understand what you think you need to do next. If you take all that intelligence and you train your models on what could go wrong and what sort of questions do you need to ask in order to get the right output, that was a very eye-opening experience, because now, by simply putting an actual chat, like voice chat agent on top, our employees save a ton of time internally by reducing their effort. Instead of having to talk, having to write down all the commands, this is now automated, but it also knows what needs to be done, and it asks you back what sort of input it needs to automate this process. So lots of efficiencies, and I think that we're just scratching the surface in terms of what the potential use cases are, just on the large language models. But I think we do this with our own team, so we don't immediately utilize third parties to begin with, because we want to make sure our employees are trained, and you only train realistically when you actually implement it in the real field. So I think this is step one. Step two is going to get into more of the day-to-day operational tasks. We were just talking, Mounir and I, before the session started, about having to deploy a network site, a radio network site. You don't think AI would be useful there, but by automating the cycle, instead of having 4 or 5 people to go, now we actually physically need only one person to go, connect the power, connect the Ethernet cable with one press. Now you've trained AI to be able to know exactly what needs to be done, all the way from commissioning, implementation, and testing, before validating to you while you're sitting there and watching, that the site is now operational and can be turned on air.
Right.
So I think that's going to unlock a lot of use cases, and we're just at the beginning of this revolution.
Just at the beginning instead, yeah, absolutely. Kemal, you want to share the AWS perspective?
I think the impact of generative AI on telcos will be enormous. I'm not sure if you have seen the Goldman Sachs report from April. So their prediction is that generative AI will add 7% to the world GDP. That amounts to almost $7 trillion of economic activity attributed to GenAI. I mean, that's a huge number. But if I have to be very telco specific, I think GenAI will change the way you interact with your customers. It will change the way you interact with your employees. And also it will generate new opportunities in terms of monetization for revenue growth as well. Before I give a couple of concrete examples, I would like to take a step back and try to define what the value of GenAI is, right? So the value of GenAI is it is ability to create content. It is indistinguishable from what humans create. And I think this is a very powerful value proposition, ability to create content that is on par with humans, right? So if you take this capability, now it has an impact on almost every business process you have in your organization, whether it is code development, customer care, marketing, sales. In every part of your business value chain, you can augment your workforce with generative AI and increase the efficiency. My colleague already mentioned contact center, so that's a kind of a low-hanging fruit, or the most impact will show up there. Think of autonomous agents embedded in chatbots, contact centers. And the good thing with these autonomous agents are you can actually connect them back to your backend systems to enable a personalized conversation. For instance, if you are tracking your customer journey, that agent not only does a human-like conversation, but it also knows the person's context. So you can have churn prediction, retention offers, you can cross-sell, upsell. So it's not just cost saving, but there are revenue opportunities popping up due to generative AI as well. Another example in terms of software development, the tools like Code Whisperer from Amazon, it suggests you code, it checks your code for security vulnerabilities, it even checks open source usage if you have to address the licensing issues, for instance. So this is a huge process involvement for software developers. And according to the people using that tool, Code Whisperer from Amazon, software developers complete the task 57% faster. So it's a huge process improvement again. And it just doesn't stop there. Your marketing department, if they have to create a content, there are models, foundational models that does text to image, text to video. Your finance department, if they have to summarize their content, you can do that through generative AI. So across the board, there are implications. And the last point I want to make is it just doesn't stop with your internal transformation. I mean, what would be the reason for a telco not to package this solution and then sell to government agencies, educational institutions, banks? We already talked about some of the challenges of flat revenues.
Yeah.
Now is the time to invest in GenAI and create solutions and monetize in the B2B market as well.
And Kemal, I think you raised a very good point about the value creation. And Mounir, what about data monetization that you see coming out of the GenAI?
Yeah, first let me just take a step back that I believe that GenAI compared to the traditional or ML-based AI that we have been experimenting or implementing is that it has these three characteristics: that it understands natural language, it can predict the next text, and it generates content. That's the big difference. It generates content, which ML does not do. And because of that, GenAI can enable two things simultaneously. It can enable the vision of, and everybody is talking about that, we've been talking about it here, the hyper-personalized services and the create on-demand experiences that are tailored to specific customers. And we'll talk about the monetization in a second. And at the same time, be used to really enable the vision of autonomous networks. Because I don't think I heard it in the morning, but the vision of autonomous network is fundamental to enabling this Techco model. The Techco model is the combination of smart IT and smart and intelligent IT operations, allowing to offer digital experiences on demand, at the same time backed by an autonomous network. And GenAI can allow these two together. It can act as a co-pilot. A co-pilot. GenAI today is the big promise of it is acting as a co-pilot. So us as a vendor in the service assurance, for example, we are embedding it in our own software capabilities. So what we are doing with that, we are making it very easy to simplify very complex network queries. So you can talk to your network, and you can extract data from your network in a plain English language, in contrast with doing some very complex queries, etc. And that allow you then to extract this data that you want in a natural language. For example, in this area, I want to understand how many of my premium users are having this kind of experience, or what kind of content they are consuming, etc. The result will come to you in a code format, because GenAI can speak your language and the code language. And then you can put it in an API and expose it. And this is where the monetization comes. I believe that the monetization is either in offering and monetizing quality of service and SLAs, or selling data. Those are the opportunities that I see in the short term. And GenAI can be a fantastic enabler to these two areas, to achieving these two things. And as we were discussing just before with Sam, like the open gateway that GSMA have launched I think it was in Mobile World Congress last year, or the Camara Alliance, etc., are exactly aimed at kind of enabling this kind of data monetization model. One last thing I want to add is that we as a software vendor, and this is very important to all the companies, including telcos, we as a software company are embedding GenAI as a development co-pilot. There is a revolution happening right now. GenAI can help you create code from your design. It can help you debug the code. It can help you translate it. For example, you take a function written in COBOL, you can write it in Java. And so it allows you to fast track really the software development capabilities on board young developers. And we've seen with Amazon Q, for example, that was announced in Mobile World Congress, in reInvent, what it can do, 20 to 50% operational gains can be achieved. And that can bootstrap any telco wanting to become a techco. Because if you want to become a techco, your staff shouldn't be just network operators or customer care representative. They need to be software people and technology people. GenAI will help you do that. And that's a big promise for our industry.
And I think it's a very good point, because one of the key things that everybody's expecting from the GenAI is that it's going to bridge the gap between business and technical objectives, right? And Denis, you want to share your perspective from Salesforce?
Yes, and as you know, here we are to talk about telco, moving to Techco, but the advantage with Salesforce is that we are working with many various industries in the CRM space, so equivalent of BSS, but charging and bidding, let's put it this way. So I'd like to share some examples of where we see the winning companies, including telcos, and we are serving more than 100 telcos worldwide, moving into GenAI. I think what is new compared to some previous technologies like hype, it's not the hype, it's something real. Metaverse, something like that, maybe it was not that real last year. It's on the board of the CEO. Okay, I think that's a big difference. So it makes the things move. What we've seen as successful to implement GenAI is when companies have decided to do it at scale, meaning appointing a chief AI officer, grouping together one team of talented people, but both from business and IT, and I would say more 70% business than and maybe 30% IT, and driving use cases by the business. Because, at the end of the day, it has to be focused on either growing the revenue or improving productivity and reducing cost. And sometimes we're only focusing on productivity and cost, but let's not forget about also growing the revenue. I think another important thing is that, as you know, the resources are still rare in this space, so putting them together is much more efficient than having them in the various silos of the company. Another key point, you know, some people will say AI exists for a while and all that. Yes, it's true, but before we didn't have the data, and I think, and the capability to compute and to manipulate all this data. AI without the data is basically useless. So this is one of the key foundations, in addition to having the right GPT type, machine learning, LMM, etc., is to set up the data right, because the data so far is in silos. In most telcos, it's in silos in IT. So putting it together, harmonizing it, getting external data as well on top of internal, but in a trusted way with a unified layer is really something key in, in moving forward positively in GenAI. Last but not least, where we see the first, and again, we are just at the beginning of the journey, but we see the first winning implementation and real benefits of AI, is when it's looked at end-to-end as a process, and not just as maybe a POC on a function, etc. So it's great to do POCs, etc., but my advice would be, based on what I've seen successful in the market, is to go as quickly as possible end-to-end. And for telco moving Techco, it's like lead to code, lead to other process, and making sure to inject AI at each step. So at the end of the day, the benefit, is really end-to-end. So again, it's the combination of AI plus the right CRM and plus the right data that will make GenAI successful.
Great. And I think there is no doubt about the role from ISVs and GSIs, to accelerate this transition. And Marc, what's the approach taken by Atos?
All right. Let's say maybe going a bit back in basics, I think there are three things which are very important, speaking to some of your customers here, also Atos customers, is one is cloud is the enabler. I think the second one is data is the driver, and AI is the differentiator. And this is how we have to look at it. I think some of the challenges we have with telcos is that the culture of data inside the organization. I think my friend from Salesforce mentioned about customer experience management, cost savings, efficiencies. But finding the right data in the telco and with all the silos is a challenge. And then the other challenge on top of it is the security of data. Let's not forget, as Atos, we are one of the largest cybersecurity companies worldwide to protect this data and create the governance around it. If it is sovereign cloud or it's in-house or whatever, it's a very important aspect. But if you ask me, the biggest challenge for telco at the moment is the culture. The culture not to break down just the silos organizational, but the silos where to find the right data in the organizations.
Yeah, sounds great. I think the point about security is straight to the point. So when it comes to GenAI, one of the risks that we keep hearing from our customers is about data protection, and what it takes to be compliant, And Ram, you know very well that every change like this comes with a time-boxed type of time frame. So which are the initiatives that you see succeeding in the short, medium, and long term?
It's a very interesting question, and a lot has to do with the initiatives that the operator himself wants to do and what they define as short, mid, and long. From our experiences, the short-term use cases which have been most successful are the ones that are hinging on shared services. So finance, HR, legal, right? Where there is an option of extracting the business knowledge and converting it into use cases that are self-rendering in the form of generative AI, thereby reducing the human intervention and taking it onto GenAI-like platforms. The other place where we see is where productivity is applicable. For example, let us take our own use case, where we have literally automated the RFP response process using GenAI tools, with human interventions to do the cross-check. We spoke about, legal. So we have introduced a framework called Lila, legal AI data models, which help redlining legal cases and then bringing it to fore. So those are the typical short-term use cases. In the midterm use cases, we believe that which are hinging on experience, as a factor. And I think the easiest use case that is emerging is which affects the contact center, the customer experience, where there's the ability to botify the responses, also to measure how the performance of the agents is, in terms of even speech recognition, whether the responses have been good or bad. So we are using GenAI and there we are doing multimodal GenAI. We are talking about text, speech, audio, video, putting together so that we can service the customer better. So experience, and wherever there's an interface of human to human, is where we are using GenAI from a midterm solution. Also learning and development, a very easy use case on GenAI. Now where it becomes complex is when we are talking about domain-centric use cases. Let's take the example of Telecom themselves, and one interesting use case that is emerging actually along with AWS is the utopian dream of an autonomous network and network ops being sort of self orchestrated in a sense. And along with AWS, we are trying to figure out, can we make that process GenAI enabled? So let me dwell a little deeper on it to just share a contextual use case. Is as phase one of the program, we are saying that can we at least take alarm management, semi-automated responses or autonomous responses for the network operation engineer through tooling. So at a very fundamental layer, we have the data sets, so we are capturing the network alarms. We are feeding in the network topologies. We are also feeding in unstructured data sets, GIS information, geospatial information, standard operating procedures, across multiple vendor ecosystems as what would form as the metadata set on which we then run the LLMs. And for example, in this case, we use SageMaker from AWS to do the initial data collation. We are using Bedrock and the LLMs that Bedrock provides. So in this case, we are using Llama and Trophy to figure out whether we can create LLMs based on the data of network and train the models. Another interesting thing that is happening is, we are talking about data, but data is not available. Yeah. So we are doing something called synthetic data creation to figure out, and that's, AI on AI to generate, meaningful data that then can be fed into the LLMs so that they can analyze the network patterns better. And finally is the, visualization or the presentation of it. So for example, if a network, and we are going in phases, we said, let's not make it full autonomous. Let's at least get to a semi-autonomous state where the network agents gets the best response, and he can do a counteract on that, where we are using AWS tools like Code Whisperer, so that the language and the conversation between him, the agent, and the machine can be more conversational, and the resolution becomes easy. So again, efficiency, experience, and effectiveness would be the journey of short, middle, and long, in our perspective.
And I think it was, as you said, so basically it's also about like the way that GenAI can create some, I would say, engaging type of content. So Denis, do you see GenAI as like one of the accelerators also to create some tailored campaigns for the end users?
Yeah, so I think at Salesforce, when we are delivering AI, we first don't forget that for the last 10 years, we've been delivering predictive AIs with our Einstein platform. And we believe the future of AI is in the combination of both, okay, predictive plus generative. I think that's the first thing. The second thing also, which helps generative AI to be developed, to be deployed much quicker than predictive AI in the past, is that the technology is quite plug and play. And it's quite easy to deploy. I would say at the end of the day, sometimes it's just a button on the screen. Of course, there's some stuff behind, but it's not that difficult to deploy. It means also not that difficult to try and potentially fail and to retry, etc. And now moving to the needs of your customers as telco, when you want to be a Techco company, what are your customers looking for? They are looking usually for simplification of the processes, to onboard, to order, easy access to the catalog, etc. They are looking for automation, and they are looking for intelligence at each touch point. And I think that's where we see that with this technology, we can really provide some use cases to support that, and being able to support the customers who also want to be managed in an hybrid mode, so both digital and also physical sometimes in person. And where we see most of the use cases today, it's across marketing, sales, and service, which, by the way, are the key areas where Salesforce is focusing on. And that's where studies like BCG, McKinsey, and Bain have confirmed that the main gains will be. So in terms of revenue, usually we see all the studies are showing, and some of the real cases we see that you can gain 3 to 5% increase in revenue in implementing those. And productivity, it can go very far with a minimum usually of around 20%. So of course, in marketing, it's about turbocharging content planning, personalizing the content on the creation, personalizing the engagement with the customers, proposing proactively the right pricing, the right bundles, the right promotions based on the analysis of all the data, and again, internal data and external data. And it's about automating insight, generation, and testing, especially for marketing. One of the key use cases we see in sales, and I'm sure some of you have experimented that, is really about automation of all the sales process. So, producing summary of calls for a sales guy, generating automatic emails to confirm the call, to make propositions of the offer that was discussed based on what was analysis during the call. Many things around proactive service monitoring and resolution, not only taking into account the case that the customer is raising, but everything which happened in the past with other customers, similar cases, and all that. And I want to insist maybe on two specific cases which we've seen recently with a telco moving into the Techco, where they realized significant benefit. One was about technical parts and material management and inventory optimization, because inventory, for a Techco is usually a lot of money. You have a lot of references, you have a lot of, eventually you're in different countries and all that. And with the use of predictive and generative AI, they were able to save millions, and at least 15 million the first year, in just optimizing this inventory, trying to guess in advance which materials they will need, when, in which location, etc., etc. So that's really something which is a concrete case for Techco company. Another one is around, I think you mentioned it at Tech Mahindra, is around RFP response or proposal generation. And I think in the space of enterprise, etc., that's very important. And you can gain not only hours, but days. Of course, at the end, there's still a sales guy validating the response, tweaking it, reviewing the prices, etc. But the predictive and generative AI, and especially generative AI, give the ability to analyze all the documentation, the RFP itself, previous responses, contracts, and all that, and generate an appropriate response for the customer that, again, needs to be checked by a human being, a sales guy, but then he really focuses his time on where it brings value and not on the maybe 70% of the work, which is about generating the proposal response. Yeah. So these are some of the examples I wanted to mention.
Marc? Yes. I think maybe I can say one thing is, because we haven't mentioned, we have COP28 now also in Dubai, and we talked about inventory. I think the sustainability aspect of AI is a very big topic. Big one. The recycling, the way we do it. For example, we're working with a telco in Saudi Arabia together, of building one of the giga cities to look at sustainability of putting smart devices, for example, for traffic, to reduce car traffic, traffic lights. There are a lot of applications you can do with it. And I think sustainability also, 5 years ago, this was not a topic in any of the discussions. I think now, if I ever speak to any of the telcos, sustainability and AI are almost combined in one sentence, and it's a very important topic we need to bring out also.
And I think to dive deep, I just find the audience just to have a look to this month edition, because you will find more of this initiative that we'll be running together between AWS and Atos. So Kemal, we'll be looking at the business opportunities, we'll be looking at the art of possible, some key use cases. What is the best way to start experimenting with GenAI?
That's a very good question. And I think to be able to answer this, I need to first define a typical life cycle of a generative AI project. I mean, what does it mean to experiment with GenAI, right? So if you start experimenting with it, the first component that you have to play with is what we call as foundational models. I think we are all very well aware of foundational models. Cloud from Anthropic, Llama from Meta, OpenAI GPT-4 model, Titan model from Amazon. So you will quickly realize that there is actually not one solution, one size that fits all type of a solution within this foundational model space. So for each use case that we are trying to develop, for each business need that we are trying to address, you will realize that there might be one foundational model that works better from the other. So if, for instance, if it is a marketing use case, if you are trying to create content, video, there are foundational models that are perfected for that purpose, like Stability AI's Stable Diffusion model, just as an example.
Yep.
So this is the first component. There needs to be some flexibility for you to play with different foundational models so that you find the right foundational model for the right use case. So that's the first component. The second component is related to the first one. There is a little bit of a problem with foundational models right now, and the whole research community is working on it. It's called hallucination. So generative AI models create quite a reasonable sentence, but the accuracy is extremely important, especially in the enterprise context. I mean, no CIO would deploy a chatbot that gives misleading responses even 1% of the time, right? So it has to be quite accurate, enterprise grade. So there are ways to address this, what we call as, for instance, retrieval augmented generation, RAG. Essentially, what people do is we connect the foundational models with your information sources, enterprise databases, etc., so that you pull the right information. But here, again, you quickly realize that there is no one way of doing this. There are different so-called vector databases. It's a mechanism to create embeddings, numerical representations of your enterprise data, and then put in a proper database. You will realize that depending on your data, structured, unstructured, text, video, there might be different databases you want to play with.
Yeah.
So you should have an environment that is flexible enough to experiment with it. So the third component is you are not developing GenAI for the sake of GenAI. You are developing GenAI to integrate with your applications, and your environment should allow an easy way to integrate with different applications, whether it is SharePoint, Slack, your chatbot. So that's the third component. And the fourth one, which is very important, is safety and security. So if you are customizing a foundational model, your enterprise data should not go out to the public. And if you are calling an API, it has to be through a secure connection, like private link. So I believe these four foundational pieces, components, should be part of the experimentation. And that's exactly what we are trying to do at AWS. Through Bedrock and SageMaker Jumpstart, you have exposure to multiple state-of-the-art foundational models. You have different database options like OpenSearch. We are adding vector database capability to other databases as well. Very easy integration to applications. There are even connectors to different systems. And you do all of this in your secure virtual private cloud environment. So whether you work with AWS or not, I think when you start experimenting, you should look for these four foundational pieces.
Yeah, and this is, of course, I mean, the best way to experiment is to start,
Yes.
you know, somewhere. So at some point, let's say GenAI and connectivity will meet, right? So which type of opportunities you see?
That's a really interesting question because one is an enabler for the other, meaning in order to actually access GenAI services, obviously you need to have the right connectivity, the right hardware. We're seeing also, I think it's another topic we'll discuss soon, evolution from CPU, GPU to tensor processing units. But from a connectivity point of view, as you can imagine, there's in any network, a typical network like TELUS, for example, we've become recently the biggest provider of IoT connected devices in Canada. We have over 2.2 million actually connected IoT devices that generate billions of petabytes of data that we're trying to actually, we created a team, right? We have a chief insights officer that basically takes all this data in an anonymous manner. We secure and private, for privacy enabled. Then we use services like GenAI to actually, we talked about operational optimization of costs, but now I think from a connectivity point of view, we're able to provide, through the insights we learn from GenAI, a lot of solutions that are creating a smarter, more intelligent IoT network for our customers. For example, took it upon ourselves a few years ago to separate the cores. So our core that carries our consumer traffic is different from our core that's carrying our IoT traffic. But now we're being specific down to site level as to what we should implement in terms of optimization, and that again is led through our GenAI. Second, there are lots, IoT as a foundation is carrying traffic back and forth. But the evolution of IoT, whether on a smart city, and we see examples, for example, there are in Canada, we have a small company that we've invested in that looks at traffic light controllers and automates that using a video camera. Not new, it's been there for a while, but it also uses IoT to connect back to the network. We're evolving through our understanding that CV2X now comes in, that the communications between the various infrastructure, where vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian, this is all happening in real time using our connectivity, but also the GenAI aspect of it is once you get all this data, can you actually predict the amount of data that needs to be transferred? So you can actually look at your edge compute, your roadside units, and predict the evolution of the hardware and the software in those very valuable real estate at the corner of the intersection by actually creating those predictions using generative AI. It requires a little. I mean, what's great about this conversational aspect is that, again, this is the beginning. Now you can ask it things like, or here's the data that I have now historically. Could you actually predict what's going to happen next time it snows above 30 centimeters, right? Or the next time we have an outage or a prediction. So to me, I think the connectivity is an enabler to GenAI. But I think vice versa, GenAI has been actually optimizing our connectivity in a way where we can do things much faster, much more optimized, but also at a lower cost for us ourselves. And obviously everyone's globally looking at optimizing the cost as well.
Thanks, Amar. Mounir, so do you think that digital marketplace, I mean, in such a dynamic context, can bring the GenAI offerings much more simple and accessible for both the enterprises and the consumers?
It can contribute definitely because, again, let's talk about what we said in the beginning, what telcos are trying to do today. They want to become techcos, right? So how is this going to be achieved with the network? Beyond just selling connectivity, we want to sell operators aim to get to a point where they can expose their network, right? The network capabilities through open APIs to be consumed by third-party providers. And those third-party providers can be hedge funds who want the data in the network, can be application developers, can be smart cities, etc. So there is a wide range of customers out there that can consume through a marketplace. To get there, you need to expose your network functions, right? Your network as a services. This is the NAS model, network as a service. So you expose the capabilities on a marketplace, and then people come subscribe and to these capabilities or the data exposed on the marketplace, and then you get the monetization model as such. And being cloud native, right, and exposing these capabilities on a digital marketplace in the cloud will allow this model to happen. So it will definitely help to extract value from GenAI. But again, what you aim to sell is, as we said before, you aim to sell quality of service, you aim to sell SLAs, because at the end of the day, this is what our industry wants to do with 5G, right? And 5G slicing or private 5G. Be in a position to monetize SLAs and quality of service, etc. Bringing it back, so this takes us from the digital marketplace to the autonomous network again, because you need to be in a position to guarantee this quality of service. You need to be in a position to guarantee these SLAs. So you need to have an autonomous network that is able to do so. And that autonomous network needs an intent. Again, you have an intent. So you say that customer is asking now for this type of service with those quality of service parameters. He wants to buy them through a marketplace. How do I then translate this and provision and translate it into network workflows and automation workflows to deliver that service and guarantee that quality of service?
Yeah.
GenAI should be the operating system of the future network that can deliver these capabilities through a marketplace. That's the big promise of GenAI. It can be that. It can translate your plain English intent for the service. I want to give this digital experience to that customer on that marketplace and can translate it into kind of workflows and capabilities and guarantee that.
Yeah, Mounir, this is probably something that goes to the zero-touch automation type of concept, but actually you have to...
Yes, exactly. And just to finish on that point, the only thing is GenAI is not there yet because we are, I think, overhyping it right now. Okay, today it predicts text, mostly. So it needs to be able to reason. And the next big promise of GenAI, and this is where the big opportunity will be, is when with things such as the self-taught reasoning that OpenAI is developing, etc., is when GenAI will be able to step-by-step reason and be able to get you to a decision, and solve a complex problem with multiple steps.
Break it down, yeah, as you said. Samer, sorry, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to top up because I think Mounir brought a really very interesting topic with the connectivity, the connection between GenAI and marketplaces. And we've done some great work with AWS. I'm not plugging you guys, but we've done some great work and we showcased it at MWC, which takes the generic concept of how do you actually connect a smart home, which is composes of various products from various backgrounds. So there's at the moment not a single API integration layer that can talk all languages. But guess what? Together, I think, with AWS, we worked together at the TM Forum. We won some Catalyst awards together as TELUS and AWS, but we were, and a vendor called Beyond. We were able to actually showcase by, taking the tech out of the, making it less complex. Yeah. We were able to make the process very seamless. So you can get a connected camera from vendor A to talk to the connected doorbell from vendor B, and all of this happens seamlessly in the back end. So there is quite a lot of merit to the digital marketplace to be an access mechanism to not only buy additional services, but the configuration management becomes, the authentication becomes seamless. So one identity solution. And then, of course, the way the customer is going to interact with is the next step, as you said. Once the hype settles down a little bit, the generative capabilities, the awareness of the intent of the user will automatically mean that by the time you actually talk to your marketplace through an interface, whether it's chat or voice, it knows the intent and actually directs you to do the right configuration. It would be aware of your complex home situation, and it simplifies, it dumbs it down to a level where my mom, as an example, would be able to talk. Just a joke-wise, my mom talks to Alexa and thanks her every time Alexa shuts the lights off. We'll get to the point where she will make it neutral, but we're still at that phase, I think.
Yeah, so I think we'll be discussing about the models, foundation models, big data lakes. Marc, which type of consumption models are currently being explored by Atos?
I think we are a little bit in our infancy at the moment regarding models, because mostly it's the most consumption model based driven instead of result driven or maybe other ways of doing it. There are many ways to measure this. But I think I still want to come back to this consumption of data, because at the moment, we just are in the infancy. We have generative AI. We're now talking about real AI coming up. We talked about silicon AI a bit. And we spoke also with many of the customers here, is that if you're not speaking AI now, then maybe in a few years' time, you're not going to be there. But also what is important, not only from a cost-saving point of view on inventory or maybe contracts or maybe HR processes, or there are many multiple applications, but and we talked about selling more and being more customer-centric and more customer-obsessed. There are many tools in there. We're still in the infancy of the same as with CRM, for example. There are only a few vendors in the world who understand telco CRM. And at the moment, our generic AI is very generic and is not yet adapted to telco-specific industry. So there's a lot of experimental things are happening. There's a lot of, from a pricing point of view, coming to that. There's a lot of education going on. We have many video calls and Zoom calls and with our customers to talk about what they want to do and how we can implement it. But I still feel that this, how it's going to be priced over the few years will done, because one of the points customers have is that our telcos have at the moment the skill set of generating AI for implementation. And maybe they will outsource it to GSIs, like, for example, Mahindra or Atos. But in the future, they will also maybe want to bring this inside internally. Yeah. So yeah. I think that you see a real evolution, or maybe a revolution in the pricing model.
Thanks. Thanks.
Maybe I should spend a bit of time with you, Marc, to show you some more concrete examples which have started to be implemented in telco, and see how we can expand that together.
And Ram, just
we are, by the way.
Yes.
So just going to the conclusion of this panel. So how then do we ensure that GenAI can be used safely in a compliant way?
Well, that's a big topic, you know, the topic of fake trust.
Let's try in a couple of minutes.
In GenAI is a big topic, and I think, you know, as they say, shared responsibility across the ecosystem becomes extremely critical. In the absence of governance around GenAI and the way AI is going to be adopted for the future, I think the responsibility would lie predominantly with the organizations in terms of how they shape it up. Again, you know, customer data through, you know, GDPR, you know, some of the other bodies will need to be maintained, but it's still an evolving area. You know, we heard TRDA in the morning, and I think every telecom authority is also very worried, I would say, in terms of, you know, how Gen AI data would be used, especially when it comes to fraud, when it comes to fake, and also the saying is, you know, for every good case of Gen AI, there's going to be 3 bad cases of Gen AI. Security is going to be a big concern area. And just taking a leaf of that and expanding just a final point is, and we didn't touch upon that, is I think the whole fabric of the ecosystem is going to be very critical. The collaboration between global system integrators and ISVs is going to play a very prominent role. You know, how the ecosystem of GenAI will emerge. I think in the morning, there was a sort of a tongue-in-cheek between Hatem and Andrew. And Hatem said that, you know, 300 AI use cases going to 1,000, and Hatem said, do you need 1,000 or should it be 1? I think I'm of the opinion that, you know, what Hatem said is important, because there's going to be an explosion of use cases. So how they get federated, you know, how it is governed is going to be a topic by itself. And I think the whole collaborative effort, you know, between the ecosystem partners and the providers is going to set the course of things to shape up.
Yeah, no, as you said, so this is a very broad topic. Just conscious of the time, can we just take like probably a few seconds each just for a quick call to action and next steps that you see? Kemal?
Yeah, I think this is exciting moment. We are at the early stages of the innovation cycle, and it's a perfect time to invest in this technology, because there are also adopters. There are people questioning whether this is a hype or not. So it's a perfect moment to have a first mover advantage. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with all of you and try to address your business needs through GenAI.
I'd suggest by Telecom Review next year, if you're not already, using it to save money and monetize some of the opportunities you have, you'll be missing out. So start now, get your teams, talk to the right partners, by the way, and ensure that you have a sovereign, secure, and private implementation that make sure that IP you have, your knowledge, your data is on-prem, and yeah, just do it. Start now.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you. I think that the most immediate and promising use case for GenAI is Copilot, specifically in software development, that every single company present in this room can start experimenting. To achieve the bigger promise of GenAI, we need two things. I think GenAI doesn't speak the network language, the telco language today. It is not trained for that. It is not trained for network analytics. We have today models like Falcon, like, you know, here in Abu Dhabi. We have others, you know, the models from Meta, etc. But we need a model trained for telco. That will take time, and that will need collaboration across the industry for us to have the telco or the network LLM that will serve the use cases that we are talking about, and that will help the GenAI to become really the operating system of a future automated and very, very smart telco into the future.
Thanks, Mounir. Marc?
Maybe to repeat myself, the three things for the telco is the cloud is the enabler, the data is the driver, and the AI is the differentiator. I think those three things, if you're not in AI now or not working with it, you will have a challenging future.
Thanks, Marc.
Yeah, and maybe to complement what you said, I think GenAI alone will not solve the telco becoming techco. I think it's part of it. Maybe to repeat myself as well, it's predictive plus generative AI. It's having the right CRM probably in the cloud, and also setting up the data properly, both harmonizing your internal data first, again, because without data you cannot do anything, and building a trusted layer to get to get through tools like AWS and others, the right data from external. And this is about technology, but let's not forget about people. I think, you know, the investment is probably 70, 80% people rather than technology. So we talk a lot about technology, but again, it's about bringing all the people from the company with the right skills, plus people from outside under one umbrella, you know, and looking at processors. Telco, I'm really recommending looking at processors end-to-end to realize the full value of AI at scale, because this is what really going to deliver increased revenue and optimize productivity, and again at scale, meaning with big numbers.
Thanks, Denis.
Right. I think just to summarize from our perspective, you know, the term GenAI as a standalone means nothing. So it is always GenAI plus process automation, GenAI and engineering, GenAI and robotics, GenAI and customer experience that makes the use case stronger. So as immediate next steps, at least from Tech Mahindra, you know, we launched it 2 months back globally. We are going to launch it in Middle East as GenAI Studio as a service, where we are going to expose our use cases to our customers, starting with the telco operators, and take them on the journey of the build. We spoke about the data. We haven't spoken about, you know, source code generations for building LLM models, the choice of LLM models, and finally taking it to proof of concepts and production. Because this process is going to be iterative. There's no silver bullet. And the idea is, you know, along with the ecosystems and some of our partners, including the operators, we hope some of these use cases become really transformational for both business, cost saving, efficiency, and further gains.
Thanks, Ram. So with that said, this is closing the panel about transition in this journey that we discussed about from telco to telco. A big thanks to the emeritus panelists and colleagues and friends here on the stage, and to Mr. Tony and his team for having us here, organizing the 17th edition of the Telecom Review Summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.